So something that I wanted to discuss today that I personally have enjoyed since I was in middle school and have actually even participated in recently since I've been in college was combat sports, that being boxing and mixed martial arts. And that's something that I've just watched since I was in middle school. Like every time I had the TV to myself at home, I would find somewhere to watch it on ESPN or an off ESPN like channel, and I would study that, and I was just very fascinated by it, and I've always been fascinated by it. But what I wanted to discuss specifically today is the science of combat sports and what actually happens when you're in the ring or you're in the cage with someone. Now, what you might be thinking right now is, also bear with me, I don't have a cameraman with me today, so I'm going to be presenting pictures and stuff, so just bear with me, and I'll try my best to show them. But yes, combat sports is dangerous, as you can see here. You run the risk of ending up like Homer Simpson right here, being punched by a cartoon rendering of Mike Tyson right in the stomach. And Homer's expression kind of says it all right there. Yes, it is a very dangerous sport. And on average, you might be shocked to learn there are an average of, according to CNN, there are 9 to 13 deaths in boxing every year that are sustained from in-ring injuries. Now, what actually causes that, you might be shocked to learn, is when you get punched in the head and you go down, what happens is boxers will go down and they will hit their heads on the back of the floor, on the canvas, which they're in the ring, and that will actually be what concusses them worse than the actual punch to the head. Now, what a concussion actually is, I'm going to just put it into more scientific terms for you, is when your skull whips back so far and it sustains a traumatic brain injury from a blow to the head, in this case, a punch or a kick if you're in mixed martial arts, or an elbow or something like that, and your head whips back so hard that it causes your brain to whip into your skull, which can lead to headaches, nausea, dizziness, your confusion, where you're unaware of your surroundings, or the final one, unconsciousness. Now, what you might not know is that you can sustain a concussion without being knocked out, but you cannot be knocked out without sustaining a concussion. So that's the little division right there. An example of this occurred actually in a UFC fight several years back with a man named Frankie Edgar, who was competing in a fight, and he was actually knocked down from punches to the head in the very first round, not once, not twice, but 3 times in the first round. And this is a picture of him at the end of that fight. He actually came back to win that fight. Now, I'm going to delve into how that is actually possible a little bit later. But what I wanted to talk about today was a UFC heavyweight who just really puts up an example of like destructive power, really, of people in the UFC and in combat sports, and how they can possibly even have competitors in fights. So this is a man named Francis Ngannou. He is a UFC heavyweight from Cameroon, and he is actually about 6'4", and he averages about 250 to 255 pounds when he weighs in for fights. That is a large and scary man. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, he has to be the champion, right? He has to be the best. I mean, who could possibly beat that guy? Well, what you might be shocked to learn is that he has actually fought for the championship, and he actually lost in his first attempt. Now, it was a very brutal fight, but he actually ended up coming up short. And it was not from just a guy running away from him. It was a guy who got in there and was able to take punches from him. Now, an interesting statistic, I'll just show you real quick. This is the man who beat him. This is him after the fight. This is a man named Stipe Miocic. He is the current UFC heavyweight champion from Cleveland, and you can see the damage to his face. And you have to be wondering, because I was wondering too when I was watching the fight, how is this possible? How can he possibly take punches from this man? There have been sources that have said that Francis's punch broke the world record for hardest punch ever recorded. Now, you think back in boxing, even some people who aren't boxing or fighting fans are aware of guys like Mike Tyson and George Foreman who had these destructive punches, and this guy who just recently came to the scene is now has the world record for the hardest punch ever. Yes, he does. And sources have said that his punch has measured in at 96 horsepower, which is the equivalent of a sledgehammer being swung overhead and hitting you in the head. Now, that just sounds a little ridiculous. I'm not sure what sources are confirming or denying this, but these are what I've been told. This is what my research has confirmed. And the reason that I found interesting for why people like Stipe were able to not only take punches from him, but come back and beat him and be able to still compete for another 5-minute rounds of getting punched by this man. And the reason, I have found an article actually that tells me that the reason that there are different reasons that men are able to take punches. There are many different scientific explanations, and the most likely one that a scientist has painted a picture for is that painting a picture for concussions as a whole. Let's say your head is a house and a concussion is a storm. Now, what happens when a storm is getting into your house? Let's say your basement walls start flooding. Now, in your head, there are calcium ions in the nerve cells in your head, and when a blow is sustained to the head, they start flooding out of these, and this is like water flooding into your house. Now, there are pumps that get these things out of your head, as you would if water was coming into your house. You would try to pump this out, but at a certain point, if there is too much coming into your head, if there is too much of this calcium being pumped into your head out of your nerve cells, your brain is just going to say, I've had enough. I can't take this anymore. We've got to shut down. I'm shutting down. And your brain shuts off because it can no longer sustain this punishment and this overload of calcium ions in your brain. Now, going back to the house analogy, what's going to happen there is that if your house starts flooding during a storm and these walls in your basement are no longer able to keep the water out of your house, you're going to have to just jump ship and leave your house or go somewhere else or figure something out, because your house is flooding and you've got to get out because you don't want to drown. And in this instance, what this translates to in fighters like Stipe, who are able to take punches from men who hit like Francis Ngannou, is that some people just have different abilities. This is the only explanation that scientists can come up with for how people are able to sustain punishment like this. Even football players who take linemen who take sustained blows to the head during football games, they don't have a real explanation for it other than their body is able to pump these calcium ions out more efficiently when punishment is sustained to the head. Some people hypothesize that this is from conditioning, like boxing, which is why knockouts don't occur as much in boxing, because they're conditioned to take these punches to the head. Others argue that it is from physical conditioning. If your body is working at maximum efficiency because you are in exceptional physical condition, as some of these athletes are, and especially at championship level like Stipe is, then your body is going to be able to pump these calcium ions out of your head when you are taking punishment and you want to stay in the fight. And another explanation is that guys just simply know how to take a punch better in boxing. And that another part of it is that muscles around your neck, right here, in your neck itself and on your shoulders, are able to absorb punches to the head more, and it acts as a cushion when your head is getting knocked around. Like this man, Bob Sapp. You might think, oh my gosh, well, what you just said, this guy must never get knocked out. But it's actually the opposite in this case, because it's not only, that's good, yes, it does provide extra support, but if you get punched right here, those muscles are able to absorb it more because it's going to have more resistance. But if you get punched right here, there is a lot less give, and it is going to turn your head this way, and these muscles are not going to be able to absorb that shock and that force as much, and it is going to cause your head to whip around more, which is why boxers are able to take more sustained punishment than guys like Bob Sapp, who are just not accustomed to taking punches like that. They know how to tuck their chins and just take the punches better so that they'll be able to absorb it and stay in the fight longer. Bob has actually been knocked out countless times because he simply does not keep his chin down, and fighters know that that is the weakest area of the head, and that if you hit that, it is most likely going to concuss them and send them to the ground if they are hit right there. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope this was knowledgeable, and I hope you learned some facts today that you might not have known. I know that combat sports is a brutal sport, but it's very primal competition that I think humans are just drawn to a lot, going back to the Colosseums. And I think that once you look into the science of this, it's really almost a work of art to watch boxers be able to be in fights where they're just wars, where they're going back and forth with each other because they know all of these things. And when you look into what's actually going on inside someone's head, as like chemically and biochemically, it's very interesting to me to see, and I really think that that's why I enjoy it very much.